there's 8 guys that I think could be the most relevant comparisons. And here's the thing. If you had a situation where you tried to play a true freshman and it totally did not work and he flamed out and got benched, well, then he didn't meet the 200 passing attempts threshold. Right. So the worst examples of it going wrong aren't going to show up here, right? It had to work at least a little bit for you to get to 200 passing attempts. Here's my 8-player cohort for a Bryce Underwood comparison. Lamar Jackson at Louisville in 2015 went 6-2 as a starter. And we'll go back and hit a couple of the specific examples in a moment. Jalen Hurts at Alabama in 2016 went 13-1 as a starter. Justin Herbert in 2016 at Oregon went 2-5 as a starter. Trevor Lawrence at Clemson in 2018 won the national title, went 11-0 as a starter after he took over. Brock Purdy at Iowa State in 2018 went 7-2 as a starter. Bo Nix at Auburn in 2019. Big time Auburn dude before he transferred to Oregon. 9-4 as a true freshman starter. Jaden Daniels, future Heisman Trophy winner at LSU as a starter at Arizona State in 2019, went 8-4. And Caleb Williams, number 1 recruit in the Quinn Ewers was the number 1 quarterback that year. Caleb Williams was the number 2 quarterback. Quinn Ewers were classified. Caleb Williams was as good as the number 1 quarterback. Caleb Williams took over when Spencer Rattler flamed out in 2021 at Oklahoma, saved him in Red River, and then 5-2 as a starter down the stretch. So I was mentioning Herbert to you as an example, right? He's the only guy who had a losing record. And so part of this is, so there's the developmental piece and there's the who is our best chance to win now. I think there are things here that, of course, I would argue, of course, there's no downside developmentally for playing Underwood right away. And also, he's going to win. He's going to help you win. And in the end, who has the better chance to help Michigan win this season? Bryce Underwood, Jaden Davis, or Mikey Keene, the transfer? I think it's undoubtedly Bryce Underwood. So then there's no reason to not play him. The only reason to not play him is that you think, A, it will hurt his development, or B, there's no way he's going to be ready to go to Oklahoma in week 2 and you're going to get your doors blown off, and you'd rather have somebody with a higher floor in that situation. And I think none of that reasoning would make sense. He's got to be QB1.
Yeah. And like I said, I was giving that, probably too much deference at the time when I said that I thought Keene would play, but like you're right, there's really no reason, because even if he goes to play at Oklahoma and he loses, it's like, well, that'll be a teachable moment. Like he doesn't play. I don't think the roster situation around Bryce Underwood is nearly bad enough for him to play when he shouldn't be playing and then like develop bad habits that are too difficult for him to overcome over the course of his career. Like I think we have, like, I threw out like Christian Hackenberg to you, and he didn't fit this timeline, but like that's a guy who like played early at behind like at Penn State behind a terrible offensive line, and then I think ended up far worse off than he would have been otherwise because of it. But I don't think that situation. Yeah, I don't think that situation's at play here for Bryce Underwood. So play him. Yeah, I've done a 180 on this. Like I was a little tentative on it, but I think you have to play him.
So how these guys got their jobs, I looked up a couple of them. Jalen Hurts, he's 6'2", 212 as a true freshman. Like physical, right?
Can squat a car, yeah.
Blake Sims, starting quarterback the year before for Alabama, certainly not a great Alabama quarterback. They were the 1 seed in the playoff, but not your typical. And Jalen Hurts is like a transformational player. He begins this run of like, hey, by the way, Alabama's good at quarterback now. In a battle with Blake Barnett and Cooper Bateman, Alabama quarterback names, and doesn't win it. Blake Barnett, who was the backup the year before, wins it, starts against USC. Alabama, Nick Saban say, what are we doing? And Jalen Hurts takes over in week 2. But they couldn't get there. They couldn't get there in the preseason. Justin Herbert did not start. The season gets away from Oregon, and they figure, what the heck? The season's already lost. I think they went 4-8 in 2016, the year we're talking about. Let's put him in. He goes 2-5, but it's a lost year. That's not applicable to Underwood here. Lamar Jackson, true freshman in Louisville, in a 3-way battle. Louisville starts 3 different quarterbacks in the first 3 games of the season. And then in week 4, he throws for 300 yards and has 4 touchdowns, and Bobby Petrino's like, yeah, that guy. But it took 3 games for them to figure it out with Lamar Jackson. Brock Purdy at Iowa State. He's a late recruit, not the same kind of pedigree at all, but he's getting people's attention in spring practice. The starter gets hurt in week 2. They go to the backup. The backup stinks. They're 1-3. Bryce Purdy is tearing it up in practice, and Matt Campbell's like, we've got to do this. His first game, he throws for 318 yards and 5 touchdowns. But they couldn't get there. He was the 3rd string guy. It took an injury and poor performance for them to get to him finally. And then he went 7-2 and revolutionized Iowa State football. Trevor Lawrence, inconsistent in camp. Dabo Swinney says the opportunity to win it was there. He was young. He didn't win it. They played both Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence early. They both played the first 3 games, and by week 4, Dabo Swinney is kind of like, okay, this is obvious. Like, what are we doing? But the thing there, Kelly Bryant's a returning starting quarterback for a team that was the 1 seed in the playoff the year before, which is Michigan's not close to that. So I think Trevor Lawrence and Bryce Underwood's a good comparison, but where it doesn't compare at all is there's nobody blocking him. So I think you could go back. Nick Saban couldn't pull the trigger in a wide open race. Louisville couldn't pull the trigger in a wide open race. Iowa State couldn't pull the trigger in a wide open race. This is a wide open race. There's nobody blocking him. Do it. Mm-hmm. And then the other situations where there was somebody's like, well, what are you going to do? Bench Kelly Bryant? Dabo got there in week 4. He just couldn't get there at the beginning of the season. Just do it. Why didn't these teams do it before? The greatest coach in college football history couldn't get there. It took him until week 2. He couldn't get there. But then Jalen Hurts revolutionizes Alabama football, completely changes how they view quarterbacks. Brock Purdy revolutionizes Iowa State football. Justin Herbert elevates Oregon. Lamar Jackson revolutionizes Louisville. Deshaun Watson had kind of already done it at Clemson, but Trevor Lawrence is a star. That's what's sitting there. And I know that there are people who are going to say, it's April, he hasn't done anything. We're telling you, there's a subset, there's a cohort of comparisons here. Is there anything that would make you think Bryce Underwood is not going to belong in this group of 8 guys?
No. I also think it's funny that Nick Saban couldn't get there with Jalen Hurts, that he got there, and then the next year he benched Jalen Hurts in the national title game for a true freshman.
He learned.
Yeah.
He learned through Jalen Hurts so that Jalen Hurts kind of got the short end of the stick on the way in and the short end of the stick on the way out.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts was like, remember when you wouldn't play me? And Nick Saban said, yeah, I'm never doing that again. You're out for the second half. So this is where I think Michigan is. And the final point I would like to make is I think Bryce Underwood has a chance to transform Michigan football. Mm-hmm. Like, this is where we are. Maybe we'll be wrong, but I think there's enough evidence here with what is coming out of spring practice, with what he personally is showing, with his talent. People are talking about his accuracy, his ball placement. You see the physical gifts. People are talking about him getting to the edge and running away from people. You see all of that. And then also like the opportunity here and what guys like him have done in the past. I went through all the best quarterbacks in Michigan history. Do you know how many Michigan quarterbacks have been taken in the first round of the draft in their history?
3.
2. Do you know who they are?
J.J. McCarthy and Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah. So that's where we are. So J.J. McCarthy, this is one of those. J.J. McCarthy already did this. J.J. McCarthy already elevated, and Chad Henne was a second-round pick and was a very good quarterback. But J.J. McCarthy already elevated Michigan quarterback play, and no offense to J.J. McCarthy, who is a national champion and a top 10 NFL draft pick. What Bryce Underwood could be compared to J.J. McCarthy, J.J. McCarthy was a 5-star recruit, but we are talking another level, are we not? Potentially.
I don't think J.J. McCarthy was ever viewed as the driver of Michigan's success, right?
So we're just saying. We're saying this is what's out there. We're saying CJ Carr could do this at Notre Dame. Julian Sain could do this at Ohio State. Dante Moore could do this at Oregon. Malik Washington could do this at Maryland. Drake Lindsay could do this at Minnesota. This is out there. Aiden Childs in year 2 at Michigan State, I think, is in a very similar spot to Dylan Raiola as a second-year starter whose year 1 was iffy and maybe people are giving up on him. There are huge opportunities across the North for quarterbacks to elevate their teams, but there is no greater opportunity than what is happening at Michigan.